Yeah, please, शुरू करो.
Assalamu alaikum. Good evening. Today's evening webinar, we'll be discussing about 3D imaging and its use in implant treatment planning and in dentistry. And before starting the topic, I'd like to introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Nair Firdaus. Dr. Nair Firdaus is a very enthusiastic maxillofacial surgeon from our GDP group and one of the founding members of the group. And Sir finished his BDS from Krishna Deva Raya Dental College, and then pursued in his MDS in Oral and Maxillofacial Surgery from Yenepoa Dental College, Yenepoa University in Bangalore. And Sir has then worked in multiple dental and dental clinics as well as hospitals. And Sir is a member of International Congress of Oral Implantology from US. And Sir has also worked in cleft lip, palate and periofacial anomalies in Unity Health Complex in Bangalore. Sir also is a life member of ICOI and Association of Cleft lip, cleft palate and periofacial anomalies of India. Right now, Sir is working as a consultant in Riyadh, a specialized dental center in Saudi Arabia. And Sir's special interests are in head and neck cancer, oral implantology, as well as anatomic variants in head and neck region. And Sir also has a retractor to his name called Nair's retractor. And Sir will be talking about the topic in detail. And to talk about the topic 3D imaging, that is CBCT in treatment planning in dentistry and specifically in oral implantology. As we know, the gold standard for imaging in dental implants today is CBCT. So it becomes very important that we realize the importance of CBCT as well as its principles and how it to be used. And mostly the general dental practitioners, they will not be aware of the anatomic landmarks as a whole in the maxilla and mandible. So it becomes very important to identify the anatomic landmarks and not to confuse it with the pathology. So I'll hand over to Sir now, and the topic will be very interesting to listen. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Noman. I'll just begin the sharing of my presentation. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Thank you, Dr. Noman, for such an elaborate introduction. Very good evening to all those attending this session on guidelines for dental imaging organized by Team GDP. I am Dr. Nair Firdaus, a maxillofacial surgeon. The dental world is constantly evolving in terms of new technology and ways to make patients' lives easier. As my topic today, the use of three-dimensional dental imaging system ranges for a variety of clinical applications such as dental implant planning, visualizing the progress of abnormal teeth, diagnosing root canal issues, diagnosing dental cavities, or diagnosing dental trauma. It also allows us to get a fuller picture of the anatomical structure of the patient in a three-dimensional perspective. What is the purpose of today's presentation? The main agenda is to present what is the three-dimensional imaging technology that everyone these days seems to be talking about, how exactly does it work, and its applications in dentistry. Finally, the summary. So what is the three-dimensional imaging and how does it work? Three-dimensional dental imaging is a full head and neck computerized tomography scan to help the dentist get a much more clear and detailed view of the physiology and the teeth structure. The device works by creating a super accurate patient-specific digital image of a dental surface that is then saved as a computer file. using specialized software. The scan is then translated into a three-dimensional digital representation, and eventually the resulting digital model may be that of a tooth, several teeth, or that of a jaw. This slide is just to orient you on the differences between the conventional CT scanning and the CBCT scanning technologies. And the principle of three-dimensional imaging utilizes a pyramidal or a cone-shaped beam, a cone-shaped beam area detector, that acquires a full volume of images in a single rotation with no need for patient movement. Whereas the X-ray cone rotates 360 degrees around imaging area, and X-rays are accurately detected over a flat detector. This is a flat detector here, unlike the conventional CT scanning technique, the concept of which I will be dealing in the next slide. Coming to the image acquisition process, this involves two phases, mainly the acquisition phase and the reconstruction phase. In the acquisition phase, there is a synchronous full or partial rotation of an X-ray cone and the area detector, which generates a set of basic images forming a projection data. And in the reconstruction phase, these raw images are then formatted into a volumetric data set, which can be organized as orthogonal images, which are then secondarily reconstructed in a cone beam geometry. The two-dimensional imaging technique, as in a panoramic radiograph, is used to depict the body of the mandible, maxilla, and the lower one half of the maxillary sinuses in a single image. This modality is probably the most used diagnostic modality in implant dentistry. However, for quantitative pre-prosthetic implant planning, panoramic radiography is not the most accurate of the diagnostic modality, as structures of the jaws become magnified more as the object distance increases and the object X-ray source distance decreases. In this technique, to overcome this magnification, the diagnostic templates that have 5 millimeter ball bearings or wires incorporated around the curvature of the dental arch are worn by the patient during the panoramic radiograph acquisition, which enable the dentist to determine the exact amounts of magnification in the radiograph. With two-dimensional imaging, the letters are superimposed, making it difficult to make out fine and underlying details. Whereas in the volumetric imaging, it is like removing a particular slice to examine it clearly and accurately. The image on the left here is useless in terms of the accurate visualization of an impacted supernumerary tooth in comparison with the three-dimensional volumetric imaging, which gives us the clear and accurate position of the impacted tooth. Voxel. This is a combination of voxel and a pixel, volume and pixel, and this represents the smallest distinguishable box of a three-dimensional image, similar to a pixel representation in the two-dimensional data. The distance between any two pixels is called the interpixel distance, and this represents the real-world distance. As the image is taken, it is presented in slices to represent the vertical and horizontal depth. And voxels serve as the building blocks of three-dimensional imaging, such as dots per inch, that is the DPI in the computer terminology. The different fields of view are ranging from 20 by 19 centimeters, which is considered the largest of the sensor, to the focused field of view of 8 by 5 centimeters. The medium field of view is what is depicted in the bottom right of the slide, the size of which is 12 by 7 centimeters. We're talking about the large field of view. This covers the entire skull from the calvaria to the lower border of the mandible and sometimes even the cervical vertebra. And this is the representation in the different axial plane and the different visualization planes, which I will be dealing with in the further slides. The second field of view is the medium one, and this includes the infraorbital rims, the lower margin of the mandible, except the orbits and the calvaria. Likewise, as the name suggests, the field of view that is limited to the focused, this includes only an immediate portion of the anatomic structure, such as the portion of the jaw, which is that of the mandible or a maxilla. And there is something called as limited and stitched field of view. This is a type of focused exposure onto a specific region, as an individual tooth or multiple teeth, which are then digitally stitched to generate a wider image. And this field of view is useful in endodontic assessment and evaluation of multiple canals and complex root morphology. Let's now see some of the different machines provided by the different manufacturers. The oldest one in the cone beam computer tomography imaging is the Newtom scanners. This is considered as a dinosaur in terms of three-dimensional imaging of the head and neck. And the other machines from the different manufacturers are from Hitachi, and there's another machine from Image Science International. A few more CBCT machines like from Kodak, Morita, and Vatek. Now, irrespective of the type of machines used to acquire the image, the concept remains the same, except of the acquisition times, which range from 5 to 40 seconds. The recent four-dimensional imaging machines take up to 2 to 4 minutes for acquiring a scan. And here in this slide, you can see some more machines. The radiation dose of three-dimensional imaging and the dosimetry, according to White and Stewart, the CBCT focused exposure for a dentoalveolar complex had an exposure of up to 40 microsieverts, which is far less compared to the conventional CT scans of from multi-slide detectors carrying modalities, which have exposure of rate of up to 2000 microsieverts per scan. And in comparison, the intraoral radiographs have less than 8.3 microsieverts. The OPG and the cephalometric scans ranges from 9 to 26 microsieverts and 3 to 6 microsieverts respectively. According to Ludlow and John, who gave a paper on dosimetry comparing different machines, the full mouth series and the large field of view CBCT exposure, the exposure rate ranges from 400 to 600 microsieverts depending on the type of machine and the manufacturing guidelines. Vision is arguably one of our greatest strengths of humans, and even the most tremendously complex anatomy tends to become easy, or at least much easier to understand as soon as you find a way to visualize them. The main purpose of three-dimensional imaging is to provide both qualitative and quantitative information about a structure or structural anatomy from images obtained with multiple modalities, including digital radiography and computer tomography. The principles of CBCT in comparison with limitation of the two-dimensional imaging. CBCT is a scanning technology that allows us to understand the maxillofacial complex and the spatial relationship of anatomic structures. Talking about the reference planes, a plane is a two-dimensional slice through a three-dimensional space, which can be thought of as a glass sheet. The anatomical planes are different lines used to divide the human body. You will commonly see them when looking at anatomical models and prosections. These anatomical planes allow for accurate description of a location and also provides the clinician to understand what the image is trying to show or reveal. We have different planes of visualization when it comes to any three-dimensional imaging modality, and three reference planes are the axial slicing, the sagittal slicing, and the coronal slicing, which is corresponds to the reference box that defines planes relative to superior and anterior and lateral aspects of the anatomy. Coming to the individual planes, the axial plane slices through the anatomy in a transverse or horizontal direction, and the image on the right represents this area of the anatomy. The coronal plane slices through the anatomy from side to side in a vertical direction, as you can see in this picture, and the image on the center represents the area shown on the far right image. Likewise, the sagittal plane is a slice through the anatomy from the front to back, and the image can on the left represents the area shown in the center. Just a note, the cross-sectional images or the transaxial slices of an area can be developed with as less as 0.5 millimeters to 5 millimeter thickness of spacing between images for minute assessment of the interest of the area of interest. There are wide applications of three-dimensional imaging technology in the field of medicine and dentistry, such as the dental implantology, TMJ assessment, pre-surgical assessment to evaluate the status of impacted teeth, for reconstructive surgeries in order to visualize the actual extent of damage, and also to fabricate a surgical reconstruction template. It is also used for airway assessment in cases of obstructive sleep apnea or velopharyngeal incompetencies. The other uses are orthodontic assessment to plan for orthodontic surgeries, and most importantly, the assessment of pathologies. Today, I will only be talking pertaining to dental implant planning and guidance in this presentation. The three-dimensional imaging modalities, they send volume data to a third-party software for an accurate three-dimensional model replacement for pre-surgical planning. Before we see the clinical applications, it is important to know the objectives of diagnostic imaging, which depend on a number of factors, including the amount and type of information required and the time period of the treatment rendered. The clinical applications can be broadly classified into three phases. The phase one is termed the pre-prosthetic implant imaging phase, which involves identifying disease, determining bone quality and quantity to determine the implant position and orientation. Phase two is termed a surgical implant imaging phase. This is to evaluate the surgical sites during and immediately after surgery. And it can also be used to assess in the optimal position and orientation of the dental implants, to evaluate the healing and integration phase of the implant surgery. And finally, to ensure that abutment position and prosthetic fabrication are in correct position. The phase three is termed the post-prosthetic implant imaging phase, and this phase commences just after the prosthesis is placed and continues as long as the implant remains in the jaw. The objectives of this phase of imaging are to evaluate the long-term maintenance of implant rigid fixation and function, and including the crestal bone levels around each implant, and also to evaluate the implant complex. Coming to the evaluation of edentulous ridges, primarily visual inspection for contour, height and width of the edentulous ridge is paramount. We palpate to detect any concavities or depressions. This step is essential to determine if patient needs any bone augmentative procedures. And we have to observe crown to bone relationship, which is the distance between the ideal position of clinical crowns and the underlying bone. We can also measure the distance between the dentulous ridge and the opposing dentition to ensure enough space for the restoration, which is a minimum of 8 millimeters. And the length of edentulous area can be measured to determine the approximate number of implants needed. This can only be verified through radiographs, as fibrous overlying tissues can be deceiving. Nevertheless, edentulous ridge must be radiographically examined and assessed. The ideal imaging techniques in the implants have to have a certain characteristics. That is, during the preoperative radiographic assessment, the ideal characteristic of a radiographic technique, they should have the ability to visualize the site of implant in the mesiodistal, facial-lingual, and superior-inferior dimensions. They have to have the ability to determine axial rotation of implants to allow reliable and accurate measurements. They should have the capacity to evaluate trabecular bone density and cortical thickness. They should have the capacity to correlate the image site with the clinical site. And they should be reasonably accessible and should be less cost effective to the patient. And finally, about the radiation dose, it should have a minimal radiation risk. That is the principle of as low as reasonably applicable should be applicable. The preoperative radiographs should reveal, number one, the position and size of relevant normal anatomic structures, including the inferior alveolar canals, the mental foramina, the incisive or nasopalatine canal, or the nasal floor. Second one being the shape and size of the antera, including the position of the antral floor and its relation to the adjacent teeth. The third one being the presence of any underlying disease that could compromise the outcome of the treatment, such as osteosclerosis, presence of any buried teeth or retained roots, quantity of alveolar crest or the basal bone, allowing direct measurements of the height, width, and the shape of the bone. And finally, the quality or the density of the bone, noting an amount of cortical bone present and the density of the cancellous bone, and also the trabecular spaces and their sizes. CBCT scans are the standard of care in implants these days. This technique hugely expands the fields for diagnosis and treatment possibilities in full mouth rehabilitation cases. It provides clinicians with submillimetric spatial resolution images of high diagnostic quality with relatively short scanning times, which is ranging from 10 to 70 seconds, and a reported radiation dose equivalent to that needed for just 4 to 15 panoramic radiographs based on the different machines and the field of view selected. The most valuable data that can be achieved from the three-dimensional imaging modalities is the identification of the proximity to the vital structures, be it the neurovascular bundle or the sinus cavities. The accurate nerve mapping is very important for prevention of iatrogenic mishaps during implant installation in the anatomic zones. Now, what exactly are these anatomic zones? We'll show you in a bit. The significance of preoperative diagnostic planning is to decide the precise healing scope of a prosthetic implant therapy, to re-establish chewing function, and it's imperative to assess bone availability and existing anatomical landmarks. This is easier when using three-dimensional diagnostics than using illustrations with the traditional two-dimensional images. Coming to the bone availability, the most frequently reported indications of the use of CBCT in implant planning area is to measure the amount of the alveolar ridge and map the bone morphology of a possible implant site for osseointegration of the implant. The quantitative evaluation of the bone availability, can be categorized into quantitative evaluation and qualitative evaluation. And in the quantitative evaluation, the bone compactness is a significant factor for implant placement to expect the ability to stabilize the implant with minimal bone height in otherwise compromised ridges. And it also helps in the precise estimation of the alveolar bone height and weight, which is mandatory for number one, selecting the implant size, suitable size, and also to establish a degree of angulation of the edentulous alveolar ridge. The second type of evaluation of the bone availability is the quantitative, continuing with the quantitative evaluation. And under the quantitative evaluation, we measure the bone height and the width. And the bone height is measured from the crest of the alveolar ridge to the opposing border of the bone or an anatomical structure, which is, and why is this important? Because according to the bone height, the implant length is determined. According to the bone height, the implant length is determined. And talking about the bone width, it is the buccopalatal or the buccolingual variable width of the alveolar bone, and this is significant as to the selection of the implant diameter. The height assessment in the maxillary anterior region extends from the crest to the inferior border of the nasal fossa, and in the posterior region, it is from the floor of the maxillary sinus to the crest of the alveolar ridge. Likewise, in the mandibular anterior regions, it is from the crest of the alveolar ridge to the inferior border of the mandible, and in the posterior region, it is from the crest of the superior border of the crest to the superior border of the mandibular canal. After the adequate height is available, the next most significant criterion affecting the long-term survival of the implant is the width of the alveolar bone, and the width is assessed circumferential to the implant also, and the width is measured at specific points to evaluate the need of any guided bone grafting procedures if need be. The lateral and circumferential bone around the implant is also very important because this dictates its long-term stability and success. As you can see in this picture, a minimum of 1.5 millimeter bone, circumferential bone, is advocated in between the adjacent teeth. The second assessment is the qualitative evaluation of the bone availability. And when it comes to the bone quality, it is categorized into 4 groups, type 1 to type 4, or as commonly referred as type D1 to D4. The type 1 is primarily composed of dense cortical bone, and the type 2 is a thick, dense to porous cortical bone surrounding a coarse trabecular bone. And the type 3 is a central fine trabecular bone surrounded by a porous and a thin layer of cortical bone. And finally, the type D or the type 4 type of bone is the fine trabecular pattern with the least density, and the cortical layer is very thin if at all it is present. A note on the Hounsfield scale before we proceed further, and this is named after an English electrical engineer, Sir Godfrey Newbold Hounsfield. This is also referred to as a Hounsfield unit. It is a scale used to measure the bone density in the CBCT scans. It can measure accurately the density of the selected point, whether it's related to bone or other tissues. Hounsfield unit gives a quantitative assessment of the bone density where it's measured by the ability of the tissues to attenuate X-ray beam. Hounsfield scale ranges from -1000, that is of the air, to +3000, that for the enamel. And while bone quality refers to both thickness and density of the cortical plates as well as trabecular portion of the bone, this parameter influences or limits the success of the treatment protocol. The cortical bone density in the anterior region, just as an example, you can see in the slide that the anterior region of the mandible is around, in the lower anterior region of the mandible is around 2000 Hounsfield units, and for the trabecular pattern in the maxillary anterior region, it is around 400 Hounsfield units, and whereas the mandibular trabecular, it's around 640 Hounsfield units. We can segregate different anatomical zones based on their density as per the Hounsfield units. And according to Leckham and Norton, it can be seen that a difference in the bone density exists for the 4 regions within the mouth, that is the maxillary anterior, mandibular anterior, and the maxillary and mandibular posterior respectively. And they concluded that the mean density value for an anterior mandible is greater than 950 Hounsfield units, and the anterior maxilla and the posterior mandible, it is between 650 to 700 Hounsfield units, and whereas the posterior maxillary region, that is the tuberosity region, the Hounsfield unit is less than 0. Ridge orientation in morphology. This is important because it shows us the inclination of the alveolar edentulous ridge, so that the virtual implant can be positioned in a cross-sectional alveolar bone using special implant planning software. The CBCT shows the type of ridge morphology present in the anterior and the posterior region of the mandible region, wherein it can show that the type of bone is either type of ridge. I'm so sorry. The morphology pattern of the ridge is either C type, P type, or U type. And the red line here, this represents a 2 millimeter reference line, which is coronal to the mandibular nerve canal. With the advent of 3D imaging modalities, we can identify the ridge inclination, with the help of software, and also orient the implant as per the anatomic morphology, with simultaneously choosing a suitable length and width of the implant. Coming to the anatomical factors assessed by the CBCT imaging, according to Tolstunov, a diplomat of the American Board of Oral Implantology, the alveolar ridge or the alveolar jaws can be, the alveolar process can be divided into 4 regions or the functional implant zones, as they are commonly referred to as, with each region possessing unique characteristics of anatomy, blood supply, pattern of bone resorption, bone quality, and quantity, and it also allows us to identify the need for any bone grafting and other supplemental surgical procedures, and also it allows us to accurately identify and locate the related implant success rate. And the functional zone identifications on a reformatted panoramic images, as you can see here, the mandibular anterior region, maxillary anterior region, and the maxillary and the mandibular posterior regions. Coming to the functional zones, the functional zone 1, also known as the traumatic zone, consists of an alveolar ridge of premaxilla and the teeth from the right to the left premolar region. It exhibits the greatest loss of the bone after tooth loss or extraction, which occurs in the labiopalatal or horizontal direction, and mainly on the facial aspect or the facial side of the alveolar ridge. Any bone loss in this region is crucial due to its aesthetic risk with dental implants, and if severe bone loss occurs, the implants are harder to place in an aesthetically favorable position. The nasopalatine canal is very important because it contains the nasopalatine nerve, descending branch of the nasopalatine artery, the fibrous connective tissue. The significance of this is if an implant contacts the neural tissues in this canal, if it contacts the neural tissues, it could lead to failure of the osseointegration or the sensory dysfunction. Therefore, when one or both central incisors have been lost for a while, limited cone beam computed tomography imaging is indicated to determine the dimensions and morphology of the nasopalatine canal before implant planning. The image on the right reveals the cross-sectional views identifying the exact location of the nasopalatine canal, and the image on the left is of the different visualization planes, that is the axial, coronal, and the sagittal with the volumetric rendering, and for the identification and the volumetric assessment for the nasopalatine canal and its exact location. The functional implant zone 2, this is the sinus zone and located at the base of the maxillary sinus, and the CBCT is indicated in this region to evaluate bone height between the floor of the maxillary sinus and the alveolar bone. And when tooth is lost or the teeth are lost in this region, it leads to pneumatization of the sinus into the area which was initially occupied by the teeth or the tooth. This may suggest that it may require vertical augmentation or the lateral augmentation, such as sinus lift procedures, and presence and or absence of the sinus septae, which could complicate the sinus lift procedures if encountered intraoperatively. And also it helps in the detection of superior alveolar artery, which we'll see in the next slide. The preoperative implant planning considerations include the alveolar bone grafting needs for prediction of complications using panoramic versus CBCT images. In the picture on the top, the CBCT shows the position of the posterior alveolar artery and the middle superior alveolar artery before creating the lateral window into the maxillary sinus. And the picture on the bottom shows the artery during the sinus lift procedures located at 15 millimeters from the alveolar crest as diagnosed using CBCT. The functional implant zone 3, which is the interforaminal zone, and this zone is comprised of the area of the mandibular alveolar complex between mental foramen and between the right and the left premolar regions. This usually is associated with thin alveolar ridge, and the area of concern in this zone is the sublingual undercuts, and the significance of which is if the alveolar ridge is not properly evaluated preoperatively, there's a possibility of the perforating the lingual cortex, and a region which can be a region for severe bleeding and the formation of expanded sublingual hematoma, which can become life-threatening and fatal in some cases, and also it can lead to symphyseal ecchymosis. The position of mental foramina while implant planning is very important because implants in the mandibular premolar region are dictated by the size and the location of the mental foramina. Its location can vary from the mandibular canine to the first molar region. Once the zone of safety is detected through CBCT, the implant can be placed anterior or posterior to or above the mental foramen. The detection of accessory mental foramina is also very important, and use of the three-dimensional cone beam computed tomography helps us to identify the presence or absence of accessory foramina. As in, you can see in this picture, you have an accessory mental foramina with multiple accessory foramina in the symphyseal region, and this may increase the risk of hemorrhage intra or postoperatively, and also it also increases the chance of neuralgia or paresthesia or dysesthesia while the implant surgeries. The functional implant zone 4, this zone is located behind the mental foramina on each side and each side of the mandible, and it extends from the second premolar region to the retromolar pad. And the area of concern in this zone is the mandibular canal and its variations through which the inferior alveolar nerve and the vessel passes. And any damage to this nerve can result in persistent dysesthesia, as it supplies the sensory innervation of the lower lip and also a portion of the face over the mandibular or lower border. A minimum distance of 2 millimeters above the superior border of the canal of the mandibular nerve is to be maintained when placing an implant in this zone. Just a note or addition to the continuation of this presentation, the identification of mandibular canal variations is also very important, and this can be very helpful with the use of the three-dimensional imaging modalities. And then the CBCT, this is the CBCT image of the left mandible of a 54-year-old male, and the scan reveals that the narrow upper canal originating from the main mandibular canal. This is a case of a bifid mandibular canal, and in this variation, the anatomy is a definite consideration while planning for implant in this region to better be prepared for excessive bleeding or neural injury while implant installation. The Post-operative clinical assessment, the patient must be assessed every 6 months, starting from the first 4 to 6 months after the initial healing of the implant. And the clinical signs of implant failure include peri-implant radiolucency, indicating the bone loss. And the acceptable bone loss is 2 millimeters of circumferential bone loss in the first year. And the following subsequent years, 0.2 millimeters is acceptable. And the second criteria, radiographic criteria depicting the failure of the implant, the widening of the periodontal space of the adjacent teeth. This indicates poor stress distribution. And as the implants lack sensory feedback of occlusal forces, thus the occlusion must be monitored regularly to detect any screw loosening, fracture of the processes, redness, swelling, or any discomfort over the implant region. Examination for the signs of peri-implant mucositis, which is the inflammation of the surrounding tissues, and sometimes this is variable. Sometimes it is reversible. And while examining the signs for the peri-implantitis, which is an inflammatory process affecting the tissues around the osseointegrated implant in function, and the most important criteria of peri-implantitis is the diagnostic criteria, diagnostic feature is the crestal bone loss, as you can see in this image. And this can be associated with or without mobility. And if it is associated with mobility, it is suggestive of its terminal stage of failure. And it can be associated with pain or infection. As you can see here, there's exudation of pus around the osseointegrated implants. And in the maxillary posterior region, and if there's signs of sinusitis, is indicating the involvement of maxillary sinus. And it also allows us to identify the inflammatory disease due to retained cement or cementitis. Examination of implant failures and complications are using the cone beam computer tomography, and this allows us to identify any altered sensation, which is because of the neurovascular disturbances following most often damage to the several canals, which are often easily detected by the three-dimensional imaging modality, allowing the surgeon to indicate isolate and indicate the reason for the patient discomfort or numbness. In such cases, the implant should be relieved or detoxed from the nerve canal a few threads so that the additional compression of the nerve is eliminated, and then it allows for the neurovascular bundle to regenerate or rebound back to its original position. Excessive osteotomy drilling or the selection of increased length of implant are all the consequences of a poor pre-implant planning, which leads to damage of nasopalatine canal contents. And sometimes what happens is because of this, there can be an infection or post-operative or integration failure in the maxillary posterior region, which shows the maxillary sinus infection following sinus lift procedures with the graft displacement. And excuse me, with simultaneous implant placement may be one of the problems leading to post-operative complications. And such type of infection cannot be assessed only on normal panoramic radiographs. Hence, three-dimensional investigations play a very important role. Implant displacement or malposition and the displacement of the dental implants into the maxillary sinus or the submandibular space, and the CBCT allows us to accurately assess the location of the displaced implants in different aspects, either it is anterior region or the posterior region or the lateral aspect of the maxillary sinus. And in case the displacement is into the maxillary sinus, almost always the approach of Caldwell-Leck procedure is indicated for the retrieval of the implants from the maxillary sinus. And an intraoral approach or an extraoral approach is decided based on the CBCT findings for extreme displacement in the submandibular space. Perforations, the implant tip must be well within the soft tissue coverage. If not, they may lead to the perforations, as you can see in this slide. And the major potential risk of encountering a perforation of the lingual cortex, cortical plate in the anterior mandible region, or the buccal cortical plate in the anterior region, or are massive hemorrhage of the submental and the sublingual arteries, which can lead to airway obstruction. And the perforation of the lingual concavity in the mandibular posterior region above the mylohyoid ridge might injure the lingual nerve, and if the extruded implant is left unattended, the infection might spread to the parapharyngeal and retropharyngeal space, leading to more severe complications. And the perforation of the maxillary anterior region, such as the floor of the nose, during the implant bed preparation or the placement in the anterior maxilla, may lead to difficulty in breathing and repeated bouts of infection of the nasal cavity. Now, better understanding of anatomic morphology is very important. It allows us, talking about the advantages of cone beam technology, it allows us for a better understanding of anatomic morphology, which uses the low dose compared to the helical or spherical modalities. And the machine design is a compact version. It has superior images compared to the panoramic radiographs. The cost of the machine is low in comparison with the conventional CT machines. There is low heat generation. And also the scans get acquired fast in less than 30 seconds as compared to the conventional, which take around 60 to 90 seconds. And most importantly, it portrays the anatomic truth. Like the advantages, there are some barriers to the use of CBCT, and which are the image quality and the diagnostic accuracy of the CBCT scan is affected by scatter and beam hardening. Beam hardening artifacts caused by high density structures such as enamel and radio-opaque materials. And this leads to scattered radiation, which reduces the contrast and limits the imaging of the soft tissues. Hence, the CBCT is principally indicated for imaging hard tissues only. Because of the distortion of the Hounsfield units, CBCT cannot be used for estimation of the bone density, and the scan times for CBCT are lengthy at 15 to 20 seconds and require the patient to stay completely still in comparison with the two-dimensional imaging technology. To summarize, the 3D imaging technique is it hugely expands the medical and dental fields for diagnosis and treatment possibilities. The diagnostic imaging and technique helps to develop and implement a cohesive and comprehensive treatment plan. And the clinicians, however, must recognize that each technique has advantages and limitations. The two-dimensional modalities are readily available, but cost-effective with least radiation exposure, but have the limitations of magnifications and superimpositions, and it is not possible for the clinician to develop a three-dimensional perspective of a patient's anatomy with just a single image. And the cross-sectional image is increasingly considered, the cross-sectional imaging is increasingly considered as essential for optimal implant placement, especially in cases of complex reconstruction. But the question of which technique to apply remains for the clinician to answer, carefully considering all the variables. Better understanding for a better choice. Thank you so much for all the organizing members from the team DDP for allowing me this opportunity to present this topic today. If we have any questions, we are open for questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for such a wonderful presentation. And it was a very nice presentation with all the things covered in one go, ranging from the qualitative analysis as well as the quantitative analysis of the implant planning. And sir also talked about the functional zones, that is 4 functional zones, maxillary, anterior, posterior region, then where we should be careful in those regions, and then the zone 3rd and 4th, that is mandible anterior and mandible posterior region. So, and also about the advantages and disadvantages of CBCT planning, and also comparing CBCT with the traditional medical CT imaging. We are very thankful to you, sir, and all the participants who joined this meeting. Thank you all. We will now close the meeting. Hello.